We're Aaron and Dave Tashin, co-hosts of the Mindful Educators podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others.
Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Another week, another paradise. It is Josh and Will here with the High Tech Podcast, co-hosts of an amazing experience. Are you here with me?
I am here. It's good. We're co-hosts? We got this?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
Still, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm allowed to stay?
You wouldn't say they're your listeners, would you?
Oh, dang. That's a callback. Well, golf clap. Well done.
Yeah, I brought it back.
Well,
for those of you who don't remember an episode a little while ago, Will said that you all were his listeners.
Episode 71 with Susanna. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Thank you, my listeners, for returning.
That was the thing that happened. It was quite great. And I'm not bitter at all. I'm just joking.
We are here for the second episode of the Robin S. Jeffers Learning Taxonomy Series on Gagné's Learning Taxonomy.
Yes, also known as the
RSJ
LTS.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
We love it here.
Yeah.
Hashtag RSJLTS.
Yes.
Hashtag not a sponsor. Hashtag thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Robin gets 1 cent every time we mention her name on the series.
Wow, I owe her 23 cents.
Of the cents that we have on the High Tech Podcast, which is zero. So
0 cents. But
yes.
You can be our sponsor, just like Mr. Rogers wanted you to be his neighbor. If you want to be our sponsor, reach out to us on Twitter at High Tech Podcast. As always, like, subscribe, tweet, follow, those things, whatever.
That stuff.
Send us your favorite picture of Mr. Rogers. You can also connect with us by email at inbox@hightechpod.us, where you should send a photo of an animal.
Yes.
Or a drawing. I said photo. I don't know. Maybe
whatever.
we're
Drawing's
photos
fine.
this week.
Painting, impressionist painting would be great too.
No. What do we got this week?
Okay. You ready for this one?
Bring it.
You ready for this one? A rhino wearing a sweater. Why? Because it's kind of like a Mr. Rogers rhino. That's why. Okay. So I want a rhino wearing a sweater.
Love it. He can be your neighbor.
It's true. And I just realized I'm pretty sure Mr. Rogers wore cardigans, but that doesn't have any alliteration, so it's...
Neither does sweater.
Neither does sweater.
Doesn't even have any assonance like we learned last week.
So it could be sweaters or cardigans, whichever your preference. I'm not going to check that closely. You do you. That's what I got.
It's been a long night, folks. So last but not least, make sure to find our episodes on the hightechpod.us website. All of our episodes are there. All of them have a resource page. They might have some links to the learning taxonomies we're referencing, pictures, whatever Josh comes up with. It's always awesome. Make sure to check that out and share it with friends who might be interested.
Yeah.
Whew. We made it.
It was a lot.
We're here.
It was intense.
In the second episode of the RSJ LTS.
The R's, nice, just like transition into the other acronym. This is how good we're getting at the series. We're just flying around.
We're just ready.
We got it. Yeah. So which taxonomy? Taxonomy. I was trying to say it in like a fun way, but then I just said like I added O in front of onomy, even though that's not
it just got worse.
Correct. It
Taxonomy.
Taxonomy. Whatever. Taxonomy. What are we talking about this week, Will?
Gagné's Taxonomy of Learning. Robert Gagné, interesting guy.
To many Americans.
Oh, sure. 20th century.
I was trying to. The best one.
Educator, learning psychologist. He looked at two big elements about learning taxonomies. He had his 9 events of instruction, so he actually saw his instruction as taking place in kind of a series or a sequence of events, which I kind of agree with. I'm going to put these out there so that they'll be kind of relevant as we go, but then we're going to focus in on his 5-point taxonomy. So in his events of instruction, and I think that this is relevant because of how it plays into his domains of what we can and how we learn, Number 1 starts with gaining the attention of the learners. And number 9 gets through the sequence to enhancing their retention and transfer of that information to the job. So everything in between that, once we've gained their attention, the end goal is enhancing their retention and transfer to the job. Everything in between that is like the sequence we're pretty much used to. Inform the learner of the objectives, stimulate recall of prior learning, present the content, provide learning guidance, elicit performance, ergo get them to practice, provide feedback, and then assess the performance, right? Last one leading into enhancing their retention and transfer to the job, whatever the job might be. It doesn't have to be literally, right? It doesn't have to be an actual job. It can be just getting the task done at hand. So those 9 events of instruction is like how Gagné perceived the best way to get a student to learn how to fly a kite, pick an apple, or build a tank. Like if they went through those nine events, that's the things we need to get them through to learn. What we are setting up today, and what will be relevant to all that, because these domains fit into different areas and all that process, are his 5 domains, which are intellectual skills, cognitive strategy, verbal information, motor skills, and attitude. I love this one because it's immediately not Bloom's taxonomy, right? like there's no pretty pyramid here. It's not like we're going like, except for his 9 events. His 9 events are kind of a sequence he wants people to go through in doing learning, but he's not prescribing like the 9 events don't say in event 3, stimulate recall prior learning. You can only do that by getting students to understand, or you can only get students to do that by remembering, right? Like the point of number 3 is stimulate their recall of prior learning, bring them back to something they already know, connected to something that they already do. Like to me, this honestly seems a little more like it's learner centric and even true to what the human is experiencing in learning. That's the general framework here. Reactions, thoughts, considerations.
Yeah, I mean, the graphic that I see used is a puzzle piece, so that's fun. That's a good old time.
It all fits together.
I feel like to be a taxonomy, you need a graphic. Like that's the thing we're being told by looking at all of these. Like you can't. It's like to be a band, you need a nice hit single. You know, it's like to be a taxonomy, you need that like hard hitting graphic.
Right.
To help. Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't have a band pick, you're not a band. Like, okay, so if you don't have a taxonomy picture, then
you know, yeah. No, I mean, I do like the So I am a lot less familiar with this one. While I know I've heard of it offhandedly, this is not one I've interacted with a lot. So
yeah.
I do appreciate that it's very learner centric. I appreciate that it also talks about like getting attention and stuff like that. Like it gets into a little bit of motivation stuff, which is good. And that it talks about recall and connecting into prior learning, like any kind of that kind of reflection or like kind of beginning of learning kind of reconnection is really good.
And I think like some of that, sorry to like point to what I mean by learner centric too, is like Bloom's taxonomy is looking at descriptions of the learning process or what it takes to learn, right? This is like looking at the learner and saying what are they doing when they learn? You know what I mean? Like I think to me that's the difference here, and I love this. Like number 5 is attitude. You don't see attitude in Bloom's, right? But attitude actually plays into a lot about how someone learns, and if their attitude has been changed by what they learn, or if their attitude is resistant to what they learn. Like I think that's really important. And it's true of the human. That's in the learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely more focused on what the person does than what what the goal is for the learner. Like, right. And so I do like that. Now, I would say that's a positive and a negative. It focuses on what they do, but I do like that some other taxonomies do package it a little bit more like a goal. Like not just that they're doing this, but that they are to the negative that you're pointing out for Bloom's, it is a positive to Bloom's, I think, is that it also is saying, like, this is what the learner should be able to do when they're done.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
And I do think that can be helpful to set goalposts. But I do like that this is also walking through, though, kind of like a flow for how to do things and the things that people do. I will say the one downside I still see that this one has, that Bloom's also has, is it's a 1 through 9 on this one, and Bloom's is like a building on top of each other, right? So like,
Right.
Again, it does kind of create this linear perspective to how learning happens.
Yeah.
Now I know like he's talking about kind of reconnecting back, and there is a cyclical cyclical. There we go. Cyclical method to his system. So I do like that. Yeah. I mean, I dig this taxonomy. I can see some definitely positives from it. I really like that it tries to connect things back to prior learning, that there's a clear kind of, there should be feedback and assessment.
Right.
Like, not just do this thing, but it's kind of like, do this thing, then there must be significant feedback given and assessing the performance, and then helping them along the way afterwards. That's not even the final, that this idea of enhancing retention. Now I'm curious, I'm not as familiar with this. How does he break down like enhancing intention and transfer?
Yeah, so the point there, I think, is to try and say for the student, like, maybe you've remembered this, maybe you've gone through the entire process of creating something about whatever you're learning, but at the end of the day, like, why does it matter? What does it connect to? And so enhancing retention might be more opportunities to recall, might be more opportunities to deal with the issue at hand, but specifically going to say, hey, okay, you've just learned... This is perfect. Callback. You've just learned how to pour the cold drinks at the Wendy's drink line. And so we want to take that same information and apply it to the hot drinks, right? Like, you know, the idea that I can hold on to something I've already learned. Sorry, this is a reference to episode 69 with Lene Sanut when we talked about the Wendy's training video. Go listen to that. It's a good laugh, good time. But if I just leave the student at like, okay, make sure you angle the cup this way, make sure you press it in this way, make sure it's this much of ice, and then you're done, like, there's no follow through and there's no connection to what else it might apply to. But if I can make it clear to the student they should try to pour that with their lemonade, they should try and pour that with their Coke. Also, this will apply to how you, or this is how it doesn't apply. Like, both can be relevant. This is how it doesn't apply to pouring a hot drink, right? Like, maybe they shouldn't pour at an angle like they do with the fizzy drinks because there's no carbonation. And there's more chance that they'll spill and hurt themselves with a hot drink, right? So that's like a connection to other elements of the job and provides more transfer of the existing knowledge to something else they might also use.
Yeah. Well, and looking at this, it also kind of reminds me of kind of a reflection idea, like having them reflect, like the practical examples he gives for how to do this. Like, it's a lot of it seems like reflecting on the experience of trying and the feedback, right? Not just doing the feedback, getting the evaluation, but actually providing a chance for the student to either with other students or on their own or whatever that may look like, actually reflect on the experience and how that might change what they do in the future.
Right.
Which is I'm totally behind that. I love the idea. We've talked about this with Justin. We don't take enough time to pause in learning and reflect on the experience of learning. Right. And so like, the word's not coming to me, but whatever, like, really official education term we give to it, which is,
it's not going to hit me either at the moment.
I'm just like brain. That's what I can think of. Brain.
We'll come back to that one.
Metacognition. There we go. We call this metacognition often. But this idea of like reflecting back on things and actually like processing and thinking about the actual learning that happened or the experience, right? So like, I really like that. I think that's something, because of his focus on the learner process and not just the what they should be able to do or what they're doing. He's getting to actual ways in which we can help enhance learning. And that's something Bloom's doesn't do that well.
Right.
Bloom's does not lend itself to like reflection. Now, like, one could argue that like some of the things Bloom's types of learning and levels they're learning, you would say, well, like, reflecting helps people better get to those areas. But Bloom doesn't, in its face, kind of help give that. And we're only talking about Bloom's because that's the only one we've talked about at this point. We'll keep building on the ones we keep talking about. But
yeah, the 5th episode in this series is going to be chock full of information.
Yes, we're going to have so much information. But so I do like that, the kind of the assessing part.
Now, you also mentioned, like, hey, the puzzle piece, and it's 1 through 9, you're like linear. One of the things I think is more powerful about this, though, in its linear structure, is this is reproducible. So like if you get a student from 1 to 9, the goal then should be to start back over at 1. Like whatever the next thing you're going to learn, or if they haven't learned it, or what, you know what I mean? Like it's trying to reinforce that if you've missed something, or if you get to stage 8 and the students haven't really grasped it, did something go wrong at step 1 or step 2 or step 3? Like this as a methodology is something you can test and reproduce and try at stage 2 again to make sure stage 5 gets better. You know what I mean? Like, it's not necessarily like, oh, if the students didn't remember enough facts, they're not going to create well. Well, maybe, but maybe they're actually just going to be genuinely skilled at the thing, and whether they remember the facts or not, they'll be able to create whatever they need on the spot. Like, that's to me the downside of Bloom's. Like, there's no like we hope and we think that doing more remembering will make the creating better or the application better, but Gagné is positing with these events of instruction that, like, if you go in this sequence and something doesn't work, start over or work at one of the steps again.
Yeah, absolutely. I like this one. I think it's cool. Like, it fits a lot of, like, again, this is probably my problem with a lot of the taxonomies. I feel like it's just giving different terms and organizing it slightly different to the same things we're talking about. Other than Bloom's. I will say this about Bloom's. Bloom's is, like, just very... Like, some of the ones we're going to look at, it's like Finks or even Webb's. I'm okay, it's just like reterming, right, of these. But then you got Bloom's off in its own little camp. Sometimes I feel like that it's like, I don't know if you retermed things. You just kind of created a pyramid.
Well, right. And like, his goes back. Bloom's is like kind of the OG.
Yeah. So anyway, I like this. I don't know. I don't like the terming of present the content, but I get what he's getting at, so I'm not going to take issue with it because he's talking about, like, again, you're presenting what they need to know or how they're going to need to do it, or like there's
you might assume that means lecture, but it doesn't have to mean lecture.
That's not what it means. Right. I would maybe just change the terminology, but that's my difficulty with just the way that's laid out.
The word present.
I think, overall, I don't really have a lot of issues with this one. I think I'd have to really sit with this one and use it from my end. Now, have you know people who have? I mean, we both know.
Yes, yeah, I
used it, but have you seen this in action?
I can't say I've seen it in a course design like all the way through. What I have seen applied, like, so I've seen that sequence. I've used that like on an assignment or two. Like, hey, like, let's make sure we check what are we doing to gain the attention. Have we informed the students? Like, that's actually like some of these follow lesson plan templates I've used and even seen used in K-12. I used them in higher ed, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, a lesson plan, a little be like step 1 on it says gain attention. What did you do to gain attention? Step 2, did you inform the, this has been on that. What I've seen more consistently played with when it comes to like assignment creation and instructional design is the domains, the actual like 5 elements that he breaks down learning into. So, if we're trying to understand intellectual skills and what folks are doing in that space, that kind of gets back to a lot of the remember, understand, maybe apply and analyze stages. It's very concrete information. It's defined concepts. You're trying to help students maybe understand rules. Like, this is what intellectual skills focuses on. Problem solving's in there, but it goes further than his next one is cognitive strategy, and that's trying to get folks into things like setting goals, tracking their progress, modifying their strategies. Like, this element, like, you know what I mean? You see, I think it's really evident to see that Gagné's ones here, even just these first 2 domains he's referencing. I don't know if I'm using the right word for this. First categories of learning, because he's also got the domains. This one's pretty deep learning taxonomy. His categories of intellectual skills and cognitive strategy are both trying to get the student into their own learning or learn about the learning around them or make us think about how they learn. It's not like, did they remember the facts or not? It's like, can my students set goals? Can my students rehearse things and improve their practices? Like, that's really powerful language and think about what you want them to accomplish in the learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
And beyond that, like, so he's got verbal information, he's got motor skills, he's got attitude. What I really like about these ones is that it opens up what we can focus on in the student. A lot of times these kinds of things, especially Bloom, stays cognitive or it stays intellectual. Number 4 being motor skills for Gagné. this is like where we start to see things like skiing or running or martial arts become relevant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's studying, or this is studying the full scope of the human learning experience. I think the only times I've seen folks relate Bloom's to motor skills or psychomotor is at the create level. Like, okay, so they've remembered the facts about all the, you know, historical art figures they need to, and now they're going to create a painting. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, whoa, big jump there. Like, maybe they need to remember the certain ways to use a brush stroke. Maybe they need to know the difference between a pencil and a pen. Like, there's some really, I think, physical things to learning that typically get forgotten in some of the other taxonomies.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that's a positive here, that there seems to be more of a focus on kind of the actions being done and how that works. Because some of the taxonomies can get very ethereal in their definitions of things. And this is very practical. Like, this is very, like, do this, do this, do this. Like, this is kind of the idea. So I do like that, because, like, we need some guidance on what do we actually do to learn.
Right.
Like, this is why learning is such a big topic. It's tough to really conceptualize what, like, even people who claim to be the best experts on learning still struggle in some areas to identify what, like, sometimes we're like, man, how did they actually learn that? Like, at the end of the day, if we're all being a little honest with ourselves,
can they prove that?
we've all had that at a moment in a teacher. Like, wow, how did they get that? Like, how did they pick that up?
Right.
So, like, yeah, I like this. It's pretty practical. I want to dig into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I really like it.
I see a lot of positives. I like it, like you said, it's practical, which really speaks to me. But I think, besides my definitions and kind of going over the whole thing so far, which I have, at least as I'm thinking about it, like, oh, I really like that. I really like that. Like, the stuff I've been telling you, I like. At a cons level, the irony here is that because of the 9 events of instruction kind of thing, like, in one sense, that's really prescriptive. And like I said, I've seen lesson plans that are even, like, driven around this. Like, you can see all 9 of the events in the lesson plan. Well, maybe that's not how learning needs to happen every class.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think that it's good to use this, and I think it's really good for cognitive, like, I'd say learning science, right? Like, it's really easy, like I was saying earlier, like, if the students didn't get good test grades, well, maybe I need to look at 1 through 9 and see where in 1 through 9 I can improve.
Yeah.
It's really cool to think about how I can improve in motivating my students or getting their attention, step 1. But maybe I just don't connect with the students. You know, like, maybe there's literally nothing I'm going to be able to do to make number 1 better. And that's not necessarily my fault or their fault, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting to think it through that way, but there's still, like, the human element to all this where this is not going to work or might fail more than we want it to.
So really, one of the takeaways from this episode is going, at least for Will's perspective on taxonomies, is, once again, Will's con is the hashtag on TaxCon. It's like, I like the idea, I don't like the structure, the universal structure.
It's literally what I said in the first episode with Robin.
which is like just those who know Will, if you know Will, it's so you. That's so like the structural element.
Anti-establishment.
Yeah, exactly. Which is true. But again, I do think you're right on that. I think that is a weakness of taxonomy idea in general, that we like boxes as humans. Humans are hard to put into boxes. Learning is complex.
Yeah.
It's not as easy. Even seasoned teachers will get students who don't learn, or will struggle to learn in the method that they have set up.
Well, and
like,
like,
so,
I think I'll push this back to you a little bit this way. Like, you came from what I would call informal learning, like pastoring and the religious space of churches and stuff like that. That's informal learning. You are teaching, you are like with youth and stuff like that.
Nobody's
and now
asking me to set goals, you know.
Right, and there's no assessments, but
which,
like,
I would argue is why a lot of people weren't learning, but it's fine.
Need more goals in church. No.
Well, I mean, that's true.
Maybe.
But that's for a different reason.
That's the other podcast. That's the High Church podcast.
Yeah, that's another situation you can ask me about later.
Now that you're informal learning, right? do you see where some of these things could be useful in the informal learning? We just said that,
yeah.
but like, do you even recognize places where you already work to gain the attention of your learners? Like you kind of see these things in
You already
action.
see that stuff happening, right? Like in informal learning areas, people are trying to do some of this stuff too. Like we talk about motivating people. Like it's obvious you need to motivate someone, even in like a lecture message idea. Like, okay, it's clear you need to get people to care about what you're saying.
Don't fall asleep.
The people who don't are bad speakers. Like that's just reality. Like you need to get people to care and be motivated about what you're saying. Well, however that looks, right? I've preached and taught and said lots of messages and speeches, and my worst ones have been the ones where I skipped over like motivating them to care, like getting their attention.
Yeah.
You know? And we naturally will, like, if we're talking about an idea, you'll recall back to something they might have also done, or an example of something that ties into this. That in its essence, in an informal way, is trying to kind of recall back, right, to something else to help kind of make connections between things. We've all in teaching got the present the content down, whether you're informal or not. Like we've at least figured out
we're all a bunch of
somehow
narcissists.
we need to tell people things. Okay, like that's so my biggest thing I've seen that could have been helpful in informal learning is just that there's not a lot of goal setting and not a lot of like feedback looping. There's not a lot of like making sure feedback is done and assessing, and then also reflecting. There's not a lot of reflection, but I would also argue there's not a lot of reflection in education in general. So informal learning got that both happening.
Get them.
You know, but I also I don't know if you were going here, but I could also see where, you know, listen, formal learning could maybe learn from informal learning sometimes, because informal learning also, I don't think always tries to make boxes for everything somebody's doing.
Right.
Or realizes that sometimes the
and like
you
formal
can get to,
learning,
but sometimes it's going to be different for each person.
Out of the 9, I think formal learning is probably the best at like number 2, informing learners of the objectives. Anymore, they have to be in the syllabus and they have to be on the lesson pages and stuff like that.
Well, if they make sure they're there.
Okay, so maybe it's almost good at 2. It's probably really good at number 4. Yeah, every faculty member is good at presenting the content.
Well, good,
okay,
or at least knows how to do it.
And then all of them are really good at number 8, like assessing Okay, so see, I think I made my own point. Like even education is not good at these things that are already
hard. Okay. Like we make these jokes, but like, listen, I'm not amazing at all of these things by any means. Okay, I'm still learning as I'm doing my teaching and trying to figure out how I do it. It's a complicated thing. So either way, I think that's kind of where we're at with this. This taxonomies is they can be helpful, but we just have to be careful. Be cautiously optimistic about taxonomies.
What's that word? Optimist.
I know we don't use that.
I'm not great at that.
We don't use that. I'm trying to figure out how to combine optimistic and paranoid, or like pessimistic. You know, so because I think there should be a word that's in the middle. It should be like
pissoptimist.
Pissoptimist. Be a pissed optimist. Sounds like
you should be a pissed optimist.
That's not what I was going for. Anyway, just be caution. Whatever. Taxonomy.
We're broken. It's very late.
Don't take them for all they are. On that note, okay, we've talked about taxonomies. I'm not gonna make any fancy transition. Other than I hope you remember what we talked about today, because we're
wow.
I don't know.
Loved it.
Listen, we're about to talk about an app, folks, like we do every single week.
Wait,
okay?
what?
No magic transition. If I had a button that made music, it'd be like, we're talking about an app now, boop a doop a doo, but we don't have that, so we're gonna do it now. Okay, we're gonna break the fourth wall. You're going to accept that there's no clear transition tonight, and we're going to start talking about it. So our app for tonight is called Remember, and it's Remember.
It's called Remind.
Remind.
This is not our first episode tonight, folks. It's been a long day. Hey, buddy, I got you. It's called Remind.
So yeah, pull me out of this pit of despair. Oh gosh.
Remind is an app that is designed to help you communicate with your students. Now, it started as something literally you could use to quote unquote remind your students. It would send them text messages as reminders. It's morphed into just a general communications app, but here's the power. And I kind of like knew this, but then Josh tried it and he goes, oh, wait, what? This is awesome.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I was a little kind of like, okay, Will, I got other options.
Yeah, let's move on to the next app.
Yeah, it was probably when you said it's popular in K-12, and I was like, meh.
Checked out. This is a tool where you can set up a classroom, and you can set your students to join this classroom, and they can do all sorts of communication through it. They do have to sign up with a cell phone number or an email address or certain things they got to use to get connected with it.
They have to do both, but yes, that's correct.
I mean, technically, but
because somebody we know on this podcast only did one, and it broke it.
It's fine. If you're talking with like young kids, like apparently parents, need to be a part of the process, which they should be anyways if they're certain ages. But like for college age students, they sign up with their personal information, and then the platform manages all the comms and sends it to the person's preferred communication method. So like the best example is everybody signs up with their cell phone numbers, but the platform hides their numbers. And even though the messaging can take place in the platform, it texts the students what's happening. So the student can literally just treat it like a text thread and reply, but their peers and even you, the faculty member, never see their telephone number. That way you can use your phones, use text messaging to stay in communications, but you don't have to have people give up their personal cell phone numbers and things like that. People don't have to have data plans. Like the big win here is as long as you have a text messaging plan, you can use this platform.
Yeah. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Like Will and I were using it. He signed up as a student. I did as a teacher. And we were able to send each other messages through our phone, but it was fielding it through the app. And then it was just kind of coming from a random number, but it would tell me who the person was. And so like, that's very helpful. And like, it's popular in K-12 because you don't want to get your students' cell phone numbers and text stuff to them. Like but you also don't want to do it in higher ed. It's a problem in higher ed too. Like a lot of profs will do that. And if issues come up, it can be kind of problematic if you don't have the data from your phone to to whatever it may be. So like, this is really cool that you can do that. It also can help students feel more comfortable with their privacy. And then also admins can get a hold of this if you pay for it and things like that. So there's some stuff you can do. But even in our basic one that Will and I were using, like I can download or have it email me the message history from things. So like if issues ever came up or something like that, you can get that history out of there as well.
Yeah, it keeps the students from sharing their personal cell phone numbers and getting all that content lost on their personal devices, but it also lets you protect them and keep them in a more academic context. Right? They're not texting just a text or sharing numbers and doing non-school things. Like they're in your course and they're in a space where they're designed to communicate with you and with each other. Boom. Yeah. Love it. It's the name Remind because it was intended the faculty or the teacher would use that to send text message reminders like, hey, the assignment coming up this week. Hey, field trip next week. Like that kind of stuff can blend with the LMS, but we were tempted to still not use this because like, oh, there's so many apps today that help people communicate, but I know faculty who share their cell phone numbers and like, oh, that's sticky. Like I think that this is still the safer way to do that if you like to text your students.
Yeah, it's like while there's messaging stuff and things like that in Canvas or LMSs that you use, and I still would encourage faculty to use that if they can. This is a simple, like you can do it through it comes into your text messages. And I understand the simplicity of that for people. Yeah. Like they're used to responding with their text messages. Students like being able to do that because that's what they do. So like, I get it. I think there's a lot of use to this tool. So if you're looking for something like that, where you like texting your students, but you don't want to share your number, which I would encourage not doing.
Please don't.
You can do that through a tool like this. You can do that through Remind, and you're able to do it. The pricing wise, as far as we can find, I've been trying to find pricing.
They hide it.
Yeah, as far as we know, the basic messaging and texting system in it is free entirely. Like they lay that out there, which seems to work out fine.
If you're just texting, free.
Yeah, if you want, they can like set up communication hubs for institutions and like an institutional system. If that's something you're looking for, that does cost something. What that costs, I don't know.
Set a reminder and go ask them.
You can go ask Remind and see what they say. If you're listening, Remind, you just put the pricing clearly on the page.
A weird idea.
Somebody from Remind is going to listen to this and be like, you idiots, it's like at the bottom of the page. It'll be like,
that's fine. Tell us.
Okay.
And we'll send it to inbox at hightechpod.us.
Yeah, send that over there and we'll be fine. But I couldn't find it anywhere. So, but it's free for what you want to use it. So I think for most teachers and instructors and faculty who want to use this would serve the purpose they need.
Yeah.
I
know
think that's cool.
I know some faculty who still don't have smartphones, so this would be a big win there. Like you set it all up on your computer, and then it's just texting from your non-smartphone.
Well, what Will means by knows, he's heard of faculty that don't.
No, I can think of the two people specifically.
Yeah, well, they're not there now.
No, one is.
I'm just joking. Yeah, I think it's cool. Check it out. Remind.com, not remind.me or us.
Remind.me is like a German reminding app.
It was
or
a German
website
that made me very uncomfortable with where I was.
It was safe. It was fine. It was just German.
Nothing in German for me automatically is safe. That's not, nope. Nope.
Amazing.
Nothing against German people. I'm sure all your websites, it's just when I'm I'm on an English computer and it immediately goes to German, that's usually not a good sign on what website I'm on.
Where did I go? I'm in the dark web.
Where did I only got translations to German or Portuguese on my Google Translate. That's what Google Translate did. It got real confused.
It wasn't even sure.
It was like, I don't even remember that you speak English. That's how I know it didn't go well. So anyway, great tool. Check it out. Remind.com. Again, thank you for joining us, everybody, for another episode. Another episode in the Robin S. Jeffers Learning Taxonomy Series.
Yes.
Hashtag RF. RS. Sorry, I couldn't remember what I was doing.
RSJ.
LTS. Hashtag untax. That's the series. There will be more to come next week. On episode 74, we will dive into a personal favorite of mine, Webb's Depth of Knowledge. This is the one that Robin and I's team use. And so we'll check out Webb's Depth of Knowledge. And we're also going to be talking about an app called Zotero. So it'll be cool. We'll be chatting it up. And hope you guys like it. So next week, episode 74. Next episode of the Robin S. Jeffers Learning Taxonomy Series. See, Robin's just getting paid big bucks every time we say it.
Ka-ching,
anyway, ka-ching. Anyway, as a reminder, check us out on Twitter at High Tech Podcast, or email us at inbox@hightechpod.us, or check out our website, hightechpod.us. Listen, you've been saying it this way every time you do it, so I don't believe you anymore. Nope. We're done. That website, we have tons of stuff there. Again, thank you for joining us as another week as we continue to learn what it looks like to learn or harness technology in the classroom, whether online or in person or in taxonomy graphic, whatever it may be, we're learning how to harness it. So, thank you folks, and see ya.
See ya.